As the sun rose above the horizon, bathing the Okavango Delta in Botswana in golden light, a new day dawned in one of Africa's most breathtaking wilderness areas. The Delta, stretching for thousands of kilometers, was a mosaic of shimmering waterways, lush floodplains, and scattered islands of acacia trees. Life was bustling here, and among its inhabitants stood out a huge herd of African buffalo, known for their impressive size, powerful build, and formidable curved horns. This herd, numbering hundreds of heads, included both experienced old buffalo and newly born calves. Every morning, they set off in search of fresh grass, covering 30 to 40 kilometers across the vast expanses of the Delta. Constant movement made them less familiar with new territories, and young buffaloes, making such long journeys for the first time, often got lost. Just last month, several calves fell behind the herd and wandered alone for several hours before finding their mothers. This morning, the herd headed for a vast meadow surrounded by reeds and small canals, where lush green grass had grown after recent rains. The cool air and morning mist over the water created ideal conditions for grazing. The buffalo eagerly nibbled at the grass, oblivious to the world around them. At this time, one large male, distinguished by his massive horns and powerful body, separated from the herd and wandered to the nearest waterhole to drink. The waterhole seemed harmless, a shallow canal with a muddy edge, overgrown with grass. But beneath the surface lay a treacherous quagmire, where the water mixed with deep, sticky silt. The buffalo strode confidently forward, unaware of the danger. Suddenly its front legs sank into the mud, and it began to sink. The more it tried to break free, the deeper it sank. Panic seized the animal. It bellowed, shook its head, trying to hook its horns onto something solid, but the silt only pulled it in deeper. His loud cries echoed across the Delta, but the herd, busy grazing a few hundred meters away, did not notice the disaster. The young buffaloes occasionally raised their heads, but seeing nothing unusual, they returned to their meal. The male struggled in the mud, his powerful horns now barely visible above the surface. With each passing minute, his strength was leaving him. He would pause every now and then, breathing heavily to gather his strength, but hope was fading. An hour passed. The buffalo, exhausted from the struggle, could no longer bellow so loudly. His movements grew weaker and weaker, and his body sank lower and lower into the mud. He still tried to move, splashing mud, but each jerk only made the situation worse. Another hour passed, and it almost stopped struggling. Its large dark eyes looked around in search of any kind of salvation, but the herd continued to move slowly across the meadow, unaware of its desperate situation. Fortunately, this part of the Delta was not far from the Okavango National Park Ranger Station. Every morning, staff patrolled the area, monitoring the safety of nature and its inhabitants. One of them was Lebo Gang, an experienced ranger who had been working in the Delta for 15 years. Returning from his morning patrol in his SUV, he noticed something black sticking out of the mud in the canal. Looking closer, he realized it was a buffalo's horns and immediately understood the seriousness of the situation. Lebo Gang immediately contacted the base by radio to call for backup. His message was heard by Amadi, a ranger specializing in rescue operations in swampy areas. She quickly gathered two colleagues, Tumelo and Kagiso, and they began to prepare the equipment. A few minutes later, the four-person team was already rushing to the scene in a truck loaded with ropes, boards, and tools. Upon arrival, the rangers saw that the buffalo was almost motionless. Its breathing was weak, and its body was half buried in the mud. Lebo Gang and Mahdi cautiously approached the edge of the canal to assess the situation. They noticed that the mud was very soft, and they risked sinking themselves. Tumelo and Kagiso remained on solid ground, discussing a plan of action. First, they tried to tie ropes around the buffalo to help it get out on its own, but the animal was too exhausted to move. The team understood that pulling the buffalo by hand was dangerous. It could injure him or cause him to sink even deeper into the mud. Madai suggested calling in a small crane from the base, which was sometimes used for such operations. Kagiso contacted the center and requested urgent assistance. While waiting for the crane, Lebo Gang and Tumelo cautiously approached and began to scrape the mud off the buffalo's muzzle to help it breathe. The animal moaned quietly, as if sensing that help was near. After 40 minutes, the roar of an engine could be heard, and the crane appeared on the horizon. The driver, an experienced operator named Batale, carefully maneuvered the machine to the edge of the canal, avoiding soft spots. Madai and Kagiso tied the buffalo with a strong rope, passing it under its belly to distribute the load evenly. Lebo Gang gave the signal, and the crane slowly began to lift the animal. The mud sloshed away from the buffalo, and soon it was on solid ground a few meters from the canal. The team immediately rushed to the buffalo. Lebogang checked its breathing, weak but stable. Madai brought water and began to wash the thick layer of mud from its back to cool its body. Tumalo took a towel and carefully wiped the mud around its eyes and nostrils. Meanwhile, Kagiso called the veterinarian from the base, who soon arrived with medical equipment. The veterinarian, a woman named Naledi, quickly examined the buffalo. She gave him an injection of nutrient solution to restore his strength. After a few minutes, the buffalo began to stir. His eyes, still cloudy with fatigue, became clearer. Madai gently stroked his neck to calm him, while Tumalo checked his legs for injuries. Fortunately, apart from scratches and severe exhaustion, there were no serious injuries. The rangers breathed a sigh of relief. The buffalo gathered its remaining strength, slowly rose onto its front legs, then stood up completely. The team backed away so as not to scare it. The animal shook itself off, spraying mud, and took a few uncertain steps. It stopped, turned its head toward the people, as if thanking them for saving it, and slowly wandered back to the herd, which was still grazing nearby. The herd continued to graze as if nothing had happened. The rescued buffalo soon joined them, beginning to graze, occasionally glancing back at the canal that had nearly become its grave. Lebogang, Madi, Tumelo, and Kagiso watched it for a while longer, making sure it was okay. Satisfied, they began to gather their equipment. The crane drove away, leaving deep tracks in the ground, and the rangers loaded into the truck and headed back to base. The atmosphere in the car was joyful. Everyone was smiling, discussing how well the team had worked together. They knew that every life saved in the Okavango Delta was a victory, a small contribution to the preservation of wildlife. Back at base, they recorded the details of the operation in a logbook to share their experience with their colleagues. This rescue story became another chapter in the life of the Okavango Delta, where humanity and care for nature go hand in hand. The buffalo, returned to its herd, became a living reminder that even in the harsh conditions of the wild, there is room for hope and compassion. If you liked this story, like it, subscribe to the channel, and click on the bell. There are even more heartwarming stories ahead from the world of nature, people, and their struggle for life.